Really interesting sort of look at this fascinating career journey you've had. But what strikes me as you're unpacking that is it's an accumulation of experiences. And I'm sure these have been personal and professional experiences that you've been gaining. And talk about a little bit more about that, where you used what you got in the first 15 years of your career, then you kind of pivoted and you built some more experiences. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think a lot of our listeners sometimes look at their career in a very awkward way. They see it, okay, I had this job and that job, and I think we all would agree that we're really an accumulation of those experiences. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great observation, and I think really it's probably no different than something we tell our kids sometimes. Even, you have good teachers and bad teachers, and what can you learn from every one of those experiences and opportunities? And so, at the time, I had no idea, right? Working for world-class organizations, and this is just what they did. And so, again, I feel very, very fortunate that I had people early on that were investing in my development, giving me principles of, hey, a person's training should include things that make them better in the job they're in today, but also that just develop them professionally. And so some of those principles you don't see until in retrospect, but that's just, I think, partly a little bit how I'm wired also, is what can I take from this person? Every single person I've had the chance to work for in my career, there's something. And recently, my very first manager from the early 90s retired. And I've been out of touch with this person, this woman for quite a number of years. We live a long ways apart from each other. But, as people on LinkedIn were congratulating her, I told her, there are things that you taught me in the first 6 months of my career that I use today, right? And, that's the legacy, right? And so she paid that forward, and I try to pay that forward and build into what I do. So I think it's a good observation. I think everyone should try to take a little bit of time from time to time and just think about that and just be grateful for the organizations and the people along the way that have invested in us. And then me looking forward, I think that's a big part of how I try to lead, is making the company successful with or without me, right? And instilling those principles in people that were committed to developing new, young. It's very exciting to watch people earlier in their careers and see them growing and developing and taking on new challenges and opportunities. And, my opportunity to do what that woman did for me early in my career for people earlier in their journeys.
Love that. Brandon, that reminds me of something that one of our previous guests, Andreas Widmer, said. Andreas said that, companies are really just a constellation of products and services and things. What really matters is people. And I think that's what Doran seems to be talking about here, really getting to the heart of this. It's all about people and how you engage with them and how you learn from them.
Yeah. And Doran, so you mentioned right there in that answer, talk about things like appreciation, but you also said principles, which is a nice segue into what we're going to talk about here today. How do we create a values-driven, values-led organization and even select talent on that? So a good starting place for us on that. Tell us a little bit how you think about that. When you think about values, and you were thinking about for ChemX and putting in the values in place for the business, how did you start that process? And what does the concept of values mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we could have a whole long day discussion about, what are values and what are virtues. And it's tricky sometimes because virtues is a word that's a little less common. And I think values is a little more commonly used, even though I think about, the aspects of virtue, which goes back to Aristotle and Aquinas, right? And people like great thinkers like that in history. But for me, values is really about how the fabric of your culture, of your organization, and how you're going to operate. What are the operating principles?